Chapter 35. "We need to make sure that the other Row 82 doesn't detect us," said Row 82. "It could be trouble if he starts to pick a fight." "You would do that?" asked Jonathan. "Probably," said Row 82. "I already had a lot to take in. Seeing another version of myself would probably convince me I was being manipulated." "I guess that makes sense," said Jonathan. "Can you handle it?" asked Row 82. Jonathan smiled and nodded as his eyes began glowing. After a few minutes, their previous selves left to go down the mountain and seek Erica Kingsley. Stephanie felt a bit sad that she was not having an opportunity to see her again. She had become something of a hero to her, and imagining her stubborn insistence and the kindness in Erica's eyes that eventually appeared eased her nerves. Everyone else seemed completely focused as they slowly went into the cave. As they walked into the cool, dim cavern, they saw Daniel Young hooking tubes up to the various plague victims. "Back so soon?" asked Daniel. "Did you forget something?" "You could say that," said Sig angrily. "What's wrong?" asked Daniel as he narrowed his eyes. "You've never spoken to me like that before." "We've discovered who you really serve," said Jennifer. "Who I really serve? What is that supposed to mean?" laughed Daniel. "Don't try and deny it," said Jonathan. "I know what is in your mind." Daniel's face grew pale as he began stepping back. "You said you wouldn't read the minds of your allies," said Daniel. "You're not much of an ally, though," said Stephanie through her tablet. "Row 82 slit your mother's throat, but you're going to accept a murderous augment and not me," shouted Daniel in desperation. "It looks like you finally understand," said Lizard. "Stop it with those infernal air quotes," shouted Daniel angrily. He pointed his hand at Lizard and emitted a cutting beam, but to his shock, a golden glowing shield prevented his attack from doing damage. "Impossible," whispered Daniel as he turned to Sig, whose eyes were glowing brightly. "Hardly," said Kirana, who stabbed Daniel with her glowing blade. Daniel began coughing blood. He reached for his Heaven's Breath key, but it was gone. He turned to see Lizard holding the mirrored key several feet away. He coughed again and laughed. "You haven't done anything," said Daniel as he slumped down on the cavern floor. "Stopping me does not stop Abaddon. These people were set up like this before we traveled in time. I would have been better. I have a true understanding of the purpose of life. But even without me, you cannot stop my master." His words cut more deeply than any attack he had planned to use. The fear that this act would not change the future made them second-guess their strategy. Lucas searched around for something he might be missing, but he was distracted as the entire cave began glowing. Time was rewriting itself, and it needed to put everything that might be affected in its proper place to be sorted. It was almost as though time was an accountant that had found a discrepancy. There were bright flashes of light as Sig vanished. "I thought we all would go," shouted Row 82. He immediately disappeared in a bright flash next. Lizard was the next to be taken. Jennifer reached for Victor's hand, but it was too late. He had already disappeared. Kirana kissed Jonathan as she flashed out of sight. Jonathan quickly disappeared after. Stephanie's tablet exploded as she was pulled to the future. Lucas's eyes grew wide as he approached one of the beds, and he turned around. "Jennifer, it's—" started Lucas. Before he could finish, the bright light in the cavern flickered around him, and he vanished from sight. The cavern grew dim again. Jennifer looked around. The plague victims seemed to be undisturbed, and Daniel's body remained on the ground. She looked down at her key, mentally preparing for the exhausting journey to the future to see the results of their actions, when a voice startled her. "Jennifer Cedar?" came the male voice. She gasped as she whirled around. It was Max Gray. "Max," said Jennifer. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "It's a very long story," said Jennifer as she caught her breath. "What happened to all these people?" asked Max. "There is a plague," said Jennifer. "They were being used to become human sacrifices." "But not to the archdemon's hand," came a voice from the mouth of the cave. It was Amanda Madsen, and her eyes were glowing as she used her key of perception. "That's true," said Jennifer. "They were to be used by a group that worships the rest of the archdemon." "The rest of the archdemon?" asked Max skeptically. "Hang on," said Amanda. "You're different." "That's true," said Jennifer. "I've been to the distant future and then come back here." "You didn't go back to your own time?" asked Max. "No," said Jennifer. "There was something very important that was going to happen here." "You sound like Aaron Pratt," said Max with a frown. Amanda smiled. "He's right, you know," she agreed. "I can't stay here," said Jennifer. "Hang on," said Amanda. "We have to let Timothy know about these people." "And what is your rush?" asked Max. "You have all the time in the world." Jennifer recalled those words from Drew Baker. Suddenly she scratched her head and wondered why she would remember those words. Drew had said that to her in the context of searching for information about the destroyer, and they had taken care of Daniel Young. She wondered how she could have memories of something that should have never happened. "Are you okay?" asked Amanda. "No," said Jennifer. "Something is off. Something is not right here." "Yeah," said Max as he pointed to the beds surrounding them. "Sleeping sickness victims." Jennifer shook her head. "It's more than that," said Jennifer. "I shouldn't remember what Drew said. We changed time. We stopped the destroyer." "Now you seriously do sound like Aaron," said Max. "I haven't had to decipher the future before," snapped Jennifer in exasperation, "and I suddenly feel a bit guilty for making fun of him." "Yeah, we all had a taste of that when Joshua killed Peter," said Max in an apologetic tone. "Something is happening to one of the victims," interrupted Amanda. "There were some strange sounds that began echoing through the tubing between the beds." "What is going through those tubes?" asked Max. "It's some sort of energy," said Amanda. "I don't know what it is, but it's all headed for that guy over there." Amanda pointed at a bed in the middle of the cavern. It was near the place where Lucas had been when he disappeared. Suddenly the man on the bed sat up and began breathing hard. "Are you okay?" asked Max. The man looked around and noticed the others were asleep. "I am now," he said. "It looks like Corey Cooper was successful. I've made it through my most difficult ordeal." "What?" asked Jennifer. "My name is Jacob Wilson," said the man. "You're the senator from Colorado," said Amanda. "Oh, yeah," said Jennifer. "But I didn't know that you were a victim of this plague, too." "Well," said Senator Wilson slowly as the energy from the tubes began pulsing quicker into his body, "victim is one word for it." Jennifer's eyes widened as she backed away slowly. "That's why you didn't come to the council," said Jennifer in a low voice. "That's what Lucas was trying to tell me. You were never trying to save these people." "There's no doubt that divine keys and demon keys grant tremendous power," said Senator Wilson with a twisted grin, "but nothing on the level of what I am gaining. This is the power of human sacrifice." "No!" shouted Jennifer. She turned to Max and Amanda. "Get out of here." "He has a tremendous amount of energy building up in his body," said Amanda. The senator screamed as his skin burned off, revealing the same kind of carapace-like body that Jennifer had seen on Daniel Young when he had become Abaddon. In an instant, a cutting beam tore through Max Gray, killing him almost instantly. "Max!" screamed Amanda, As tears streamed down her face, Amanda pulled out a pistol and began firing rounds at the senator, but a dark purple beam swallowed the bullets up before they could harm the new destroyer. "Get out of here, Amanda," shouted Jennifer as she rushed behind one of the other beds. Amanda was too consumed with anger to hear. Her beloved Max had been cut down in front of her, and any instinct in her mind that might have persuaded her to protect herself was swallowed up in the instinct that told her to make this man pay. Though she had fired every round in the magazine, she continued squeezing the trigger and screaming. The destroyer laughed cruelly and fired a cutting beam that tore a hole in Amanda's body. She was dead before her body had slumped against the cavern floor. Jennifer grabbed her key and her eyes began glowing. Seeing Amanda's reaction to Max's death reminded her that she had someone with whom she needed to be. She needed to get to Victor in the future. The horror of knowing that their attempt to change history had probably not made any difference was exceeded only by the warning that Michael had given. She needed to follow Victor. "Your abilities cannot stop me," shouted Abaddon. He leapt up and walked toward Jennifer. "I am death incarnate. Your divine keys are no match for the power of my master." Jennifer squeezed her key tighter as the sound of footsteps approached. She was almost ready to jump to the future. She needed only a few more seconds. "Hiding?" said Abaddon. "Pathetic." The destroyer fired a beam at the same time the chamber filled with a blinding light. As the light faded, Jennifer found herself in a large crater. Rubble and debris were scattered everywhere. She looked around, fighting off the exhaustion she felt from using her key. She had no idea where she was, but she was confident that she had arrived in the shattered world that they had hoped to have saved. "Victor!" she cried out. Using her voice caused a sharp pain in her abdomen. She looked down and noticed blood flowing from a hole in her body. Her escape from the destroyer had not been quick enough to avoid taking a serious injury. She pressed her hand against the gaping wound. Her shock seemed to dull the pain that came as she applied pressure. She bit her lip and squinted her eyes as she tried to focus on her purpose. She had done everything that the Archangel Michael had asked. She had followed after Victor. She had tried to come back to him. He had to be there. He had to be coming to save her. He would know what went wrong. He would know why their attempts to change the past kept failing, and he would know what to do to make things right. He had to know. "Victor!" she screamed again. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she opened her eyes and whirled around. Her arms trembled with exhaustion as she pressed against her injury. She tried to ignore the hot, sticky feeling of her blood oozing out of her back that came and went. She waited, but there was no response. She watched, but the large, dusty crater in which she stood, aside from herself, remained empty. There were graffiti-covered chunks of concrete amid the rocks and rubble, but nothing to indicate that humanity, or anything like humanity, occupied this place. "I'm too late," she whispered. The sound of her voice seemed to become muffled. The appearance of the debris around her suddenly began to blur and darken. She was barely aware of the falling sensation as she slumped and hit her head on the rocky ground. Of course, the arrival of Jennifer Cedar had not gone unnoticed. Miles away, her appearance registered in the senses of an augment clutching a mirrored key. Row 82 blinked as he became aware of her appearance. Given his circumstances, Jennifer's sudden arrival had been the event he had expected least. Once he was certain that he was not mistaken, he gasped. "Jennifer Cedar," he said. "After all these years." Victor's eyes grew wide. "What?" he exclaimed. "She's finally arrived," said Row 82. "But she's dying." I hope you have enjoyed this presentation of Relegated, Book 2, Burden of Destiny. This story was written and narrated by the author Brett Jensen. This story is copyright 2015 by the author Brett Jensen, with all rights reserved. This story represents an original work of fiction, and any similarity to persons living or deceased is coincidental.